everyone, Novels Wonderland here. Thank you all for the love and support you've shown me and the channel.
Junji Ito, I Shall Smash Hellstar Remina. Chapter 128 to 135. The story of the cup injury. 1454 words is that. Tomi blinked, a flicker of uncertain bewilderment crossing her face. She had been born from the flesh of another Tomi. Strictly speaking, she wasn't even a year old yet. She had no family, no friends, and no memories of her own from which to understand that kind of feeling. Of course it is. Who do you think I am? I'm a practitioner on the path to Buddhahood. The 5 Buddhist precepts include not speaking falsehoods. Why would I lie to you? Amamiya Rin crouched down, meeting Tomi's eyes with a steady, unwavering gaze, his expression completely composed. When it comes to Rin, he wouldn't do anything underhanded. He does have a point, doesn't he? Maybe because they're so close, they don't feel the need to hold back around each other. I have something like that in my memories. Among those memories I'd already written off, there really were times when Mitsuo Yukiko and her friends crossed lines with each other that strangers never would. The other Tomis in the Tomi network felt Amamiya Rin's inner thoughts aligning perfectly with his words, and one by one they turned it over in their minds, and found they couldn't really argue with what he'd said. This was a good thing, wasn't it? The weaker Amamiya Rin's wariness and resistance toward them became, the easier it would be to draw him in. At this rate, someday inevitably Amamiya Rin would become a willing captive to their charm, content to spend the rest of his life at their side. The Tomis, never particularly skilled at concealing their own thoughts, entertained this sunny little fantasy with great enthusiasm. Back in the parking lot, settled into his second-hand little jeep, Amamiya Rin pulled out his phone and checked the time. Almost midnight. He rubbed his brow, restarted the engine, and as he drove back toward Shimokitazawa, put a call through to Kazumi Junya. The phone rang several times before it was picked up. Kazumi's voice came through carrying a distinct note of weary resignation. What is it now? Amamiya Rin could hear the suppressed sigh underneath Kazumi Junya's words. Paranormal incident combined with a homicide. The perpetrator is the urban legend Slit-Mouthed Woman. The victim is Mrs. Kawabe of the Kawabe household. Address is XXJO X, Shimokitazawa. Amamiya Rin relayed everything Kazumi Junya needed to know in the most economical terms possible. 2 seconds of silence on the other end of the line, followed by one long, heavy sigh. Do you know what time it is right now? It's 11:40 at night. 20 minutes until tomorrow. That sigh was a cocktail of exhaustion and something that sounded very much like making peace with one's fate. Right so. Amamiya Rin kept his eyes on the road, not entirely following Kazumi Junya's point. A vampire this afternoon, the slit-mouthed woman tonight, I mean it, your talent for getting mixed up in trouble and stumbling into the supernatural is practically a calling. You were practically born to join the compilation office. Kazumi Junya's voice carried something close to reluctant admiration. Don't say it like I enjoy it. I'd be perfectly happy if none of these things existed in the world. Amamiya Rin shot back. That's my wish too. Give me a moment, Kogure, and I will head over shortly. He hung up. By the time Amamiya Rin arrived at the Kawabe residence, Kawabe Mayo had already dressed Mrs. Kawabe's body back in its skin. It was Amamiya Rin's first proper look at Mrs. Kawabe's face. She was nowhere near Kawakami Tomi's level, and for that matter, not quite up to Kawabe Mayo's either. Speaking of which, after the alchemy salve dissolves the skin off, what happens to the chest? Amamiya Rin asked, genuinely curious. Kawabe's chest was remarkably flat, barely any contour at all. Even his own chest had more going on than hers. He didn't buy that she'd always been like this. If she had, Ricky would have starved. The fat dissolves into the muscle. Kawabe Mayo ran a hand over her own chest, her expression grieving. Amamiya Rin noticed that the grief she showed now, over this particular matter, ran considerably deeper than the grief she'd shown looking at Mrs. Kawabe's corpse. He glanced at Kawabe Mayo's chest. A fist-sized rise. Was there something padding it out? Amamiya Rin settled onto the sofa, letting his mind wander aimlessly while he waited for Kazumi Junya and the others, killing time with idle speculation. He didn't have to wait long. From outside came the muffled sound of a car engine cutting out, followed by the dull thud of doors, and then the approaching footsteps of more than one person. He pushed himself up with his cane and made his way to the entrance hall, arriving just as the knock landed on the door. He pulled it open. Outside stood Kazumi Junya and Kogyo Soichiro. Kazumi looked even more haggard than he had that afternoon. The dark circles under his eyes were particularly stark in the porch light. Kogyo had his shoulders slumped, still carrying the deflated air that came from having your idol thoroughly shattered, an atmosphere that hadn't fully dispersed yet. What did catch Amamiya Rin slightly off guard, though, was the tall, solidly built woman standing behind the two of them. Officer Indu. Hadn't he heard she never did any real work, just horse racing, slacking off, and pachinko, giving Sakata Jintoki a run for his money? Showing up for a call-out in the middle of the night, that really didn't look like someone who avoided work. Amamiya Rin's gaze slid toward Kazumi Junya. This one involves a fatality. Kogyo and I don't have the rank or authority to just walk a corpse out of here, and if the homicide division starts asking questions, and we tell them the killer was the slit-mouthed woman, we'll get our heads taken off. So I brought Inspector Indu along. Kazumi Junya had apparently read Amamiya Rin's expression well enough, and obliged with an explanation. It's not that simple. I'm here because of the slit-mouthed woman. Indu Ranko spoke in her broad Osaka accent, scratching her hair, looking thoroughly put out. Wasn't that thing finished off 15 years ago? What's it doing crawling back out now? Inspector Indu. Something stirred in Amamiya Rin's mind. He stepped aside. The situation seems a bit complicated. Please come inside. The three of them entered. Kawabi Mayo stood stiffly at the edge of the living room. Kawabi's body lay on the floor, and the sight of the head separated from the body turned Kogyo's face a shade paler. For all his solid build, Kogyo was genuinely not the brave sort, especially when it came to anything paranormal. Indu Ranko, by contrast, was nothing if not direct. She walked straight up to the body, examined the wound carefully, and didn't so much as twitch an eyebrow, just clicked her tongue. Kogyo, bring in the body bag. Indu Ranko threw the instruction over her shoulder. Kogyo hurried out. Indu Ranko turned back to look at Amamiya Rin. Run me through it. Amamiya Rin had already sorted through what he was going to say, what to disclose, what to leave out. What to leave out? His own capabilities. A patient barely out of hospital, body not yet recovered, routing the slit-mouthed woman, that was far too abnormal to wave through without scrutiny. He could hardly explain the nature of his relationship with Tomi, or let slip that the long dream existed. Either of those would probably draw attention from the upper echelons of the country. Amamiya Rin kept it simple. He said he'd driven the slit-mouthed woman off with a spoken incantation. Once he'd finished going through his account, another thing came back to him, his encounter and conversation with those elementary school girls earlier that evening. One more thing, I don't think the slit-mouthed woman only just appeared. When I was passing through Shimokitazawa today, I ran into a few primary school kids. They mentioned a strange woman who sounded like the slit-mouthed woman, and they said her weakness was hair milk. I don't know whether hair milk and hair wax are the same thing or if they had it mixed up, but I'm fairly confident there's a strong chance that strange woman they described was the slit-mouthed woman. Plus 40 ch, Walnut-chan New History, Danmachi, Summoning Rurigoku, and other Chinibu brats. Let's achieve our community goals. 100 Power Stones equals plus 1 extra chapter for everybody. Chapter 129. The Slit 2810 words. The slit-mouthed woman. Kazumi Junya's face visibly tightened, a look of uncertain alarm crossing his features. He fixed Amamiya Rin with a grave, searching gaze, as though pressing for confirmation. The slit-mouthed woman who had every kid in the country too scared to go out after dark, she actually exists. You really saw the slit-mouthed woman? That was the challenge Kazumi Junya was putting to him. Kazumi, you work at the police history compilation office and you're still asking that. Amamiya Rin couldn't help giving him a sideways look, his expression shifting into something peculiar, like a mun regarding a rare and baffling specimen. By rights, Kazumi Junya should have encountered more than his fair share of paranormal incidents by now. Why the wide-eyed disbelief? No, you're young. You probably don't know the full story. Kazumi Junya furrowed his brow, his gaze going distant, as though sorting through memories buried deep. That was 15 years ago. I was still in elementary school at the time. One day, the story going around was that a local high school girl had been in an argument with her boyfriend, and he'd accidentally cut the corner of her mouth with something. Word travels fast in school circles and disappears just as fast. That kind of ugly incident between a couple wasn't exactly uncommon. He paused, then continued. But for some reason, this one kept spreading. Eventually people were saying she'd had plastic surgery and gotten married. Others said she'd killed herself. And then somehow, out of nowhere, it mutated into a horror story that spread across the whole country, getting wilder with every retelling. In the stories, she became a woman in a long coat, wearing a scarf, a surgical mask over her face, and a pair of large scissors in her hand. She'd approach children walking home from school and ask, "Am I pretty?" Then, depending on the answer, she'd either cut their mouths open or kill them outright. In the end, I remember it was in Himeji, the police arrested a woman who'd been dressing up as the slit-mouthed woman and pulling knife pranks on the street. The newspapers ran full features on it. There was no such monster. Just a string of copycat stunts and coincidences by bored people imitating the rumor, amplified by people who couldn't help embellishing, and like that the craze slowly died down. Kazumi Junya had been close to the source. He'd known about the slit-mouthed woman before the legend even took shape, and he'd watched every twist of its evolution firsthand. Right, it was just a rumor all along. The slit-mouthed woman, some terrifying monster, complete nonsense. Kogure Soichiro trudged in carrying the body bag, grumbling as he rubbed his arms, as though trying to scrub away a chill he couldn't see. I can't stand people who blow things out of proportion. Take a perfectly ordinary nasty incident, pass it around enough times, and somehow it turns into a ghost story. Drives me mad. Kazumi Junya gave a nod and pressed on, which is to say, the slit-mouthed woman was never a monster to begin with. And even if she were, her weakness wouldn't be hair wax, because that particular weakness only exists as part of a different version of her legend. In the legend, the slit-mouthed woman had originally been a woman who went to a cosmetic surgery clinic for lip augmentation. During the procedure, her attending physician had been wearing cheap hair wax that gave off a foul smell. Unable to bear the stench, she kept flinching away during the operation, and in doing so, caused the scalpel to accidentally slash open her lips. By your logic, that version is pure fiction. The real slit-mouthed woman had her mouth cut open during a fight with her boyfriend, which means hair wax couldn't possibly have any effect on her. Amamiya Rin listened to Kazumi's analysis and Kogure's complaints, and his own brow slowly creased. He could hear what Kazumi Junya was getting at. The rumor was false, but the slit-mouthed woman was real. And the real slit-mouthed woman had no weakness to hair wax whatsoever. I did drive her off with the hair wax incantation, though. Or had he, really? Amamiya Rin sank inward, dropping into Diana, carefully replaying the confrontation with the slit-mouthed woman in his mind's eye, converting the memory into something like a video, analyzing it frame by frame. He found nothing. When he'd spoken the incantation, the slit-mouthed woman had shown no reaction whatsoever. Even after he'd recited it 3 times in a row, she'd shown no sign of having been struck by anything, only hatred and bitter resentment burning in her eyes. Was there another possibility entirely? That the slit-mouthed woman hadn't fled because of the incantation at all, but because his underhanded evil thrust to her groin had severely limited her mobility, forcing her to abandon the chase. And that his recitation of the incantation had been nothing more than empty bluster that happened to coincide. Amamiya Rin turned the question over for a long while and couldn't arrive at any certain conclusion. Ghosts are born from the human heart. Indu Ranko's broad Osaka drawl cut into his thoughts, pulling him out of his brooding. Born from the human heart. Amamiya Rin looked up at her, something stirring in his chest, an instinctive connection to the theory of mind over matter. Indu Ranko didn't explain immediately. She tipped her chin toward Kazumi Junya. Kazumi, take Miss Kawabe to another room, and get her statement. Make sure she understands the confidentiality terms. Understood. Kazumi Junya nodded and moved over to Kawabe Mayo, who was still standing in a daze, his voice gentle. Miss Kawabe, please come with me, we need to record a few details. Don't worry, everything that happened tonight will be handled properly. Kawabe Mayo gave a silent nod and followed Kazumi Junya out of the living room. Kogure, meanwhile, had finished placing Mrs. Kawabe's remains in the body bag and carried her out. Only Amamiya Rin and Indu Ranko remained in the room. Indu Ranko crossed to the sofa and dropped onto it with zero ceremony, fishing a battered, slightly crumpled pack of cigarettes from her pocket. She pulled one out and stuck it between her lips, but didn't light it. Most urban legends with any real notoriety, it tends to work something like this. Their very existence is bound to the stories that circulate about them. Especially the modern ones. They're more like a troublesome thing kneaded together out of the collective belief and terror of enormous numbers of people, that kind of mass will mixed with some soul overflowing with intense resentment or regret. Their appearance, their behavioral patterns, even a portion of their abilities, all of it is derived from whichever version of the story spread furthest. That includes their weaknesses. Amamiya Rin felt a quiet shock move through him as he listened. He'd known that the power of belief was not to be underestimated in this warped world, that it could invest the natural world with special significance, even trigger supernatural phenomena. But he hadn't imagined it could go this far. That it could directly create monsters out of ghost stories. If it could create monsters from ghost stories, then in this animistic country, could gods and Buddhas be born from human faith as well? In that case, if we could change the stories about the slit-mouthed woman on a large scale, say, spread a new version that completely counters or destroys her, would that solve her at the root? Amamiya Rin pressed on, following that thread, feeling as though he'd glimpsed a new path. What do you think? Why do you suppose the slit-mouthed woman went dormant for 15 years? Indu Ranko shot the question back at him. Amamiya Rin didn't know. He hadn't even known she'd been dormant for that long. The slit-mouthed woman, wasn't she one of Japan's most famous urban legends? Still, he thought he could guess at the truth. The police arrested a woman who'd been dressing up as the slit-mouthed woman and pulling knife pranks, that was your doing. Fighting a rumor with a rumor. A slit-mouthed woman born from rumor, negated by rumor. If a monster's power came from people believing in it, then make most people stop believing. Is that the proper method for destroying monsters? Amamiya Rin said it with a kind of wondering respect. He thought he finally understood why the Police History Compilation Office was the Police History Compilation Office, and not some paranormal countermeasures division. Because their work wasn't to destroy monsters. It was to rewrite the history that gave monsters their birth. There was a distinct whiff of fictional mystery logic to all this. Don't get ahead of yourself. It can't be done, not fully. Indu Ranko shot down his conjecture flatly. Covering an old horror legend with a rational explanation, weakening the power of collective fear and belief, it's like cutting the oxygen from a flame. At most you shrink the fire, make it lie low for a while. You can't put it out completely. Because stories can be overwritten, but memories are nearly impossible to erase entirely. As long as even one person remembers the name slit-mouthed woman, as long as anyone remembers her legend, she won't truly die. She'll only go dormant. I destroyed her once, back then. And yet here she is again. So it had been Indu Ranko who dealt with the slit-mouthed woman when she first ran rampant all those years ago. She had defeated her but could not finish her. Amamiya Rin could imagine that feeling of helplessness. He thought of Kayako, who shared the same unkillable nature. The difference between the slit-mouthed woman and Kayako seemed to be only one of degree. They shared the same fundamental trait, impossible to uproot, only to be temporarily suppressed as time passed and memory faded. This world was absolutely saturated with despair. These cursed legends and monsters, they were less like evil spirits than like natural phenomena. And natural phenomena cannot be permanently eliminated. Then why did she reappear after 15 years? Why here in Shimokitazawa? Amamiya Rin rubbed his brow and pushed on. Not a clue. Ranko answered without a hint of hesitation, almost defiantly unashamed about it. Could be some idiot made another terrible movie about her, or some paranormal TV show dug her back up and threw fuel on the fire. Could be there's been enough resentment building in this neighborhood lately, someone died here with a similar story to hers, giving her a stage to perform on again. There are any number of reasons. So how do you plan to find her this time? And what will you do when you do? Amamiya Rin let that thread drop and switched to something more practical. Old-fashioned way. Canvass the area. Interviews, especially with people who are out at night and children. Narrow down the zone where she's been appearing most frequently. Then stake out. Sit and wait. When she shows, eliminate her. Just like apprehending an ordinary suspect. The sheer plainness of the plan left Amamiya Rin momentarily at a loss for words. No tracking spells. No divination. In an era before surveillance cameras were everywhere, facing a monster with superhuman speed that looked perfectly human from the outside, and their answer was really just the most primitive possible combination of manpower, door-to-door inquiries, and waiting. Amamiya Rin already knew this country was painfully ill-equipped to handle paranormal incidents. An entire department with only 3 staff members, 2 of whom were ordinary police officers, for countless supernatural cases, all they could do was look the other way. But he truly hadn't expected the police history compilation office to be this underpowered. Watch yourself. Ranko looked at him, her gaze pausing for a moment on the cane he was leaning on. For once, her tone carried a note of genuine seriousness. That supernatural constitution of yours means you're several grades more likely to run into something than a normal person. Run into her once, and you might run into her again. These next few days, stay home if you can. Especially don't come wandering around Shimokitazawa. And if you do have to go out, keep a can of hair wax on you. Better to have it, and not need it than the other way around. Even if it's just a psychological comfort. She knew full well his supernatural constitution made him a magnet for the slit-mouthed woman, and she still wasn't going to bring him along for the operation. Amamiya Rin opened his mouth, then closed it again. He said nothing, made no offer to help. By the time he left the Kawabe residence, the night had deepened into something impenetrable. The street lamps bled rings of sickly yellow into the damp, cold air. Silence lay over everything, broken only by the occasional distant rumble of a passing car, which only made the small hours feel emptier and colder. Amamiya Rin settled into the driver's seat, and pressed his fingers against his throbbing temples. 2 incidents in a single day, a vampire and the slit-mouthed woman. The mental strain was worse than the physical exhaustion. Even with Diana as his foundation, the sheer volume of information hammering at him had drained his mind to its dregs. He glanced at his phone. Amamiya Rin started the engine. It growled to life and shattered the quiet. The jeep crept out of Shimokitazawa, and headed in the direction of Tomi's apartment. Back at the apartment, he pushed open the door, changed out of his shoes, and went straight to the bathroom for a quick cold shower. The icy water stripped away the fatigue clinging to his body and the faint, lingering smell of blood. The scissor wound on his thigh had already healed completely, nothing left but a faint line slightly lighter than the surrounding skin, the only proof that something had been there at all. He came out of the bathroom toweling his hair, and out of habit, made himself a cup of instant coffee. He carried it to the floor-to-ceiling windows in the living room. Beyond the glass lay the sleeping city, its scattered lights like fallen stars. Amamiya Rin stared at them, feeling slightly unmoored. He sipped slowly at the coffee, keeping the drowsiness at bay. Too much had happened today, far too much to digest, and yet he couldn't stop his mind from working through it. The black magic ritual for becoming a vampire. The alchemical formula from the Paracelsian system. The formation and evolution of urban legends. The true origin of the slit-mouthed woman. An enormous volume of information floated through Amamiya Rin's mind, as his exhausted brain kept sorting through the day's intake, separating what was useful from what wasn't. Mind over matter, ghosts born from the human heart, animism. Vaguely, dimly, he felt he was on the edge of something, a thread just out of reach, impossible to grasp. His mind felt like an overloaded machine grinding and groaning under a weight it couldn't bear. His temples throbbed with a steady pulse of pain, and the city lights beyond the glass began to waver and swim before him. An involuntary yawn tore itself free, pulling involuntary tears with it. Amamiya Rin blinked hard, his dry eyes briefly coming into focus, only to blur again immediately, a soft haze settling over everything like a veil of fine mist. That was it. He'd hit the wall. He took one last sip of coffee, staggered away from the window, dropped onto the sofa, and gave up on thinking entirely. The following morning. Tomi's apartment. Sunlight poured without obstruction through the spotless floor-to-ceiling windows, casting broad, brilliant patches across the pale wooden floors of the living room. Dust motes drifted in and out of visibility within the shafts of light. The room was warm. A faint, expensive fragrance, some kind of luxury incense, hung in the air, a world away from the blood and cold of the alley the night before. And yet what was unfolding in the center of the living room was entirely at odds with the bright, cozy atmosphere, strange enough, in fact, to be called genuinely bizarre. Plus 40 ch. Walnut-chan new history, Danmachi, summoning Rurigoku, and other Chinibu brats. Let's achieve our community goals. 100 Power Stones equals +1 extra chapter for everybody. Chapter 130, Undressing is really troublesome. 1405 words, I'm going to skin you alive. That kind of threat is usually something the powerful hurl at the weak, not meant literally, not actually possible. Just words. But here, in this apartment, the words had become a statement of fact. Kawakami Tomi stood barefoot in the middle of the living room. Her perfect, flawless body was fully exposed to the air, her long black hair cascading down her back, making her skin look even more porcelain white, and making the red traceries across that skin even more stark. Amamiya Rin stood behind her. His left thumb and forefinger pinched a small tuft of hair at the back of her head, his right hand held a slender fruit knife, its tip resting lightly against the back collar of her bodysuit. The fabric split open in a single clean line. He drew the blade slowly downward, not fast, but unervingly steady, tracing the curve of her spine in one straight vertical stroke. He stopped only when the tip reached the hem of the skirt. He set the fruit knife aside on the coffee table. Then, pinching the torn edges of the fabric between his fingertips, he slid both index fingers into the gap and pulled outward to either side. It gave way with unsettling ease. A sharp, grating tear rang out through the quiet living room as Amamiya Rin ripped the split in the bodysuit wider. Then he pushed both hands inside, palms moving against Kawakami Tomi's skin, forcing himself to ignore the discomfort as he worked upward, widening the gap all the way to the top of her head. He flipped the fabric forward over her face like pulling off a sweater, then slowly dragged it down. It took no small amount of time and effort. Only when the last scrap of fabric finally cleared her ankles did Amamiya Rin straighten up and let out a long breath. He was holding a complete bodysuit. It hung limp in his hand, still faintly shaped to the contours of a body, still holding its warmth, the only difference being the straight slit running down the back. So a zipper into it, and it might be wearable again. Kawakami Tomi, meanwhile, was now truly, entirely bare. The word naked had ceased to carry any meaning where she was concerned. The dark red webwork of exposed tissue spread across Amamiya Rin's field of vision. Kawakami Tomi's eye sockets and lips formed soft depressions, her ribcage expanded and contracted minutely with each breath, every muscle was defined with brutal clarity. It was hard to believe someone like this could still be alive. Could still be standing. Absolutely hideous. The head resting on the sofa offered its verdict without a shred of tact. It was Tomi's severed head. After a full night of growth, it had already regrown most of a chest and shoulders. Another day or two, and it would be whole. The body, for its part, had already grown back an entirely new head. Of course, the Kawakami Tomi currently experiencing the alchemical salve was not a newly generated Tomi. She was one of the original batch, the one who had set her sights on becoming a vampire, who had rushed back from out of town early that morning, and who was also among those afflicted by the curse, her appearance having been compromised. Hearing Tomi's jab, Kawakami Tomi turned her head, and fixed the severed head with a vicious glare. The exposed masseter muscles bulged with the force of it, giving her face a ferocity as grotesque as something out of a painted skin ghost story. You've got nothing but a head left and you're still running your mouth. Kawakami Tomi stormed toward Tomi, radiating fury with every step. She couldn't exactly argue with Tomi's point, so she decided to respond with action instead. She's going to hurt me. Tomi, completely unburdened by any sense of dignity, immediately called out to Amamiya Rin for rescue. You were the one running your mouth and setting her off. Who else is there to blame? Amamiya Rin gave a slight shake of his head, and laid the bodysuit he'd just removed flat on the coffee table. Behind him, Kawakami Tomi grabbed Tomi by the hair and hoisted her into the air. What do you think you're doing? I will bite you, don't think I won't. Tomi flailed in midair, snapping at Kawakami Tomi's wrist, and missing cleanly as Kawakami Tomi pulled her hand back without effort. Kawakami Tomi let out a cold laugh. Both hands gripping Tomi's hair, she swung her arm in a wide arc, turning Tomi into a living windmill, spinning her in circles through the air. Ya! Tomi screamed. The world wheeled around her in a dizzy blur: sofa, ceiling, Amamiya Rin, and that red, skinless body flickering past in rapid rotation. Her long hair was yanked taut with every revolution, the rush of wind loud in her ears, and the freshly grown stump of shoulder carved wild arcs through the air. All right, that's enough. Surely you've had sufficient revenge by now. After a moment, Amamiya Rin stepped in. Kawakami Tomi paused, clearly not yet satisfied. She spun Tomi around 2 more times out of pure spite before finally, lazily, coming to a stop and dropping the dizzy head onto the sofa. Tomi's face plunged straight into the cushion. She wrenched her face free, eyes still spinning, and spat through gritted teeth, "You little... I'm going to kill you. I swear I'm going to kill you. With your mouth." Kawakami Tomi folded her arms, the exposed muscles of her chest rising and falling with her breath. Terrifying as she looked, not 1 ounce of her arrogance had diminished. How does it feel? While Kawakami Tomi and Tomi bickered, Amamiya Rin reached out and pressed a finger against Kawakami Tomi's body. The sensation was springy and supple, like touching something delicately woven and elastic. The surface was smooth, the texture clearly perceptible beneath his fingertip. With a little pressure he could feel the subtle rises and falls beneath, warm and deeply strange. A little cold. A little odd. A little itchy. Kawakami Tomi found this grotesque form impossible to tolerate, and had no intention of adapting to it. She was deliberately accelerating her own regeneration. The itching is normal. Your nerve endings are directly exposed to the air. And without skin as a barrier, you'll lose moisture very quickly. Tomi's regenerative power moved swiftly. In under a minute, a complete layer of new skin had spread across her entire body, snow white, and utterly indistinguishable from what had been there before. Of course, even if there had been some difference, the apology demon's curse would have prevented Amamiya Rin from noticing it. On the coffee table, the shed bodysuit was also undergoing its own regeneration. That said, growing from a bodysuit back into a complete human body would take 2 or 3 days at the very least. The fully restored Kawakami Tomi dashed off into the bedroom. When she emerged, she had changed into a simple, clean-cut white dress. The morning light had just crept over the windowsill, settling softly over her. Her new skin was blindingly white, like freshly fired fine porcelain, carrying a clean, gentle luminescence. Standing there in the interplay of light and shadow, she looked like the first fresh leaf after rain, naturally, effortlessly pure. She walked over to Amamiya Rin, and slipped her arm through his with easy familiarity, tipping her face up to look at him, her voice carrying the faintest trace of a pout. "Rin, come take a walk with me. Just around the neighborhood, and breakfast while we're at it. I've been traveling all morning, and I'm starving." Amamiya Rin looked at her, and could sense her real intentions clearly enough. She wanted to find men. To verify whether her appearance had been restored. And at the same time, to give Tomi's severed head a little more time to recover, so that when they returned, it could serve as a sacrificial offering for the ritual to become a vampire. Here, Walnut-chan knew history, Danmachi, summoning Rurigoku, and other Chinibu brats. We have set new community milestones. 100 Power Stones equals +1 bonus chapter for all readers. Chapter 131, Breaking the Curse. 1494 words. Use me as material for your stupid ritual. What are you fantasizing about? Tomi was so furious she looked about ready to pop. It's not like I can just grab some random innocent bystander off the street. Rin would be unhappy about that. Kawakami Tomi blinked and arranged her features into an expression of perfect, guileless innocence. So I can only ask a fellow Tomi to make a small sacrifice. It's not like you can actually die, just lend a hand, won't you? The words were reasonable enough in their way, but Kawakami Tomi's eyes were brimming with undisguised malice. Lend you a hand, my foot? You actually want to use me as raw material? Who in their right mind would agree to that? Tomi bared her teeth, looking very much like she wanted to sink them into Kawakami Tomi. Hee, let's go, Rin. Kawakami Tomi beamed, looped her arm through Amamiya Rin's, and walked out the door with a light, buoyant step. Amamiya Rin found himself half-dragged, and half-pulled out of the apartment building. The morning street was only just waking up, the pavement still holding the damp chill of the night. Tomi walked ahead, the hem of her skirt swaying gently with each step, like a white cloud drifting on a breeze. Pedestrians and students coming from the opposite direction couldn't help but follow her with their eyes, and even after passing her by, they turned back to look again. Tomi's smile grew more radiant by the moment, blossoming like a rose in full flower, her entire being radiating a charm that had nowhere to go but outward. Such beauty was, naturally, a magnet for unwanted attention. Good morning. Miss, might I treat you to a cup of coffee? I know a very nice place just up ahead. A black sedan pulled up along the curb. A young man in a pressed suit, hair slicked to a gleaming shine, stepped out and positioned himself directly in Tomi's path. A polished, self-satisfied smile spread across his face. The smile on Tomi's face didn't waver. She tilted her head slightly and turned those seemingly crystalline eyes toward Amamiya Rin beside her. Oh my, if you want to invite me anywhere, you'll have to ask my boyfriend first. Only then did the man notice Amamiya Rin. He looked him up and down with a sweeping glance, and when he spotted the crutch, his expression grew even more arrogant, his tone sliding into open contempt. Boyfriend-kun? You don't look very steady on your feet. Care for a ride in my car? Surely you're not going to make a beautiful girl like her slow down to match your pace. He raised a hand and gestured casually toward the black sedan parked at the curb. In the passenger seat of that same car, however, sat a young woman with hair falling to her waist. She was beautiful enough, but her whole bearing radiated a meek, submissive quality, the sort of girl who simply endures. Watching her companion go chat up another woman, she made no scene. She simply sat in the car and cast a wounded, mournful look in Kawakami Tomi's direction. And yet, to do this openly, right in front of his own girlfriend. That was a bit much, wasn't it? What terrifying charm. With a fresh layer of skin, the apology demon's curse truly did seem to have been wiped clean. Amamiya Rin let out a barely perceptible sigh and glanced at Kawakami Tomi. She was watching him with undisguised amusement, a teasing glint in her eyes, clearly curious to see what he would do. Amamiya Rin turned back to the suited man. His gaze was calm, utterly calm, almost empty of any feeling. But the instant his eyes locked on, something changed. The air around him, that faint, weary, slightly loose quality, snapped taut in an instant, sharpening into something honed and still. Something seemed to settle and sink to the bottom of his pupils. That gaze, stripped of every extraneous thought, landed on the man's eyes. In the space of a heartbeat, the hairs on the back of the man's neck stood straight up for no reason he could name. It was as though something cold had drawn itself across his skin, a bone-deep unease that jammed every practiced word right up in his throat. A simple application of the evil eye technique. Against humans who didn't warrant direct engagement, it was still quite effective. No need for the trouble. We have nothing pressing to do, plenty of time for a walk. Amamiya Rin lowered his eyes and said it mildly. The moment the gaze broke, the man's rigid body slumped all at once in relief. He took an involuntary step backward, and the look he turned on Amamiya Rin now carried a few new notes, wariness, and a trace of unaccountable fear. A walk, you say? Walking is a great habit. Why not walk together? Even so, Tomi's pull was simply not something ordinary. Even after being pinned down by Amamiya Rin's stare, the man couldn't quite bring himself to just leave. Blinded by desire, Amamiya Rin found himself reassessing the man with a grudging sort of respect. Was beauty really worth this level of courage? Tomi-san, if you have a moment, would you like to walk with us? At that point, the long-haired woman from the passenger seat stepped out of the car. Her voice was soft and yielding, her manner thoroughly demure. Do you know me? Kawakami Tomi looked over at the long-haired woman, one eyebrow lifting. I'm Amano Sei. We're in the same department, you don't remember. The woman offered this with an embarrassed little smile, her expression slightly awkward, as if she hadn't anticipated that Kawakami Tomi might not recognize her at all. I don't bother learning the names of plain girls. Kawakami Tomi said it without a shred of hesitation. Before the words had fully left her mouth, Amamiya Rin's palm came down flat on her back. Be civil. Amamiya Rin's eyes cut to Kawakami Tomi, carrying a clear note of disapproval. Leaving aside the question of whether the woman was actually plain or not, she couldn't go on behaving with zero manners. Walking alongside Tomi, he'd end up embarrassed himself. You hit me. You actually hit me for her. I can't believe you'd do something like this to me. Kawakami Tomi's eyes went wide. Her voice cracked with the threat of tears, her eyes shone bright and glassy, as if she were on the verge of actually crying, every inch of her a picture of wounded heartbreak. And yet, how could Amamiya Rin, connected to Kawakami Tomi at the level of their very minds, be fooled by a performance like that? Now that her looks were restored, her mental state had tipped into something a bit too excitable. The man, however, saw Tomi's aggrieved expression and immediately seized on it like a lifeline. His voice climbed several notes as he rounded on Amamiya Rin with righteous indignation. How can you put your hands on a woman like that? Can't you talk things through like an adult? Tomi-san is so delicate, how could you do that to her? Without waiting for Amamiya Rin to respond, he wheeled on the flustered Amano Sei, his tone shifting to reproach. And you, Amano, you're her classmate, so why didn't you make a proper introduction from the start? Putting Tomi-san in an awkward situation, causing friction between her and her friends, isn't that your fault for being rude? I'd say Tomi-san was only so blunt because you failed to handle the introduction properly. He delivered all this with the air of a man righteously upholding justice, his eyes never failing to flicker back toward Tomi with every other word. Under this barrage, Amano Sei's face cycled through red and white in quick succession. She bit her lip, bowed her head, and twisted the hem of her clothes between her fingers, looking more flustered than ever. But Kawakami Tomi's look of tearful devastation had already vanished. At some point during his speech it had simply evaporated, replaced now by something nakedly contemptuous and mocking. Far from joining the man in blaming Amamiya Rin, she tightened her grip on Amamiya Rin's arm. My boyfriend and I were just being playful with each other. What exactly are you over there rambling on about? Those words landed and the man went completely blank. Every flattering thing he'd rehearsed lodged itself in his throat. His expression froze on his face in a way that was, frankly, quite ridiculous. Walnut-chan for more chapters. New history, Danmachi, summoning Rurigoku, and other Chinibu brats help us reach these goals. 100 Power Stones equals +1 universal bonus chapter. Chapter 132, Lickdog's Invitation 2782 words, hee. This is exactly the expression I wanted to see. What an absolutely priceless look on your face. Kawakami Tomi surveyed the man's ridiculous display and laughed without a shred of restraint. Her laughter was bright and melodic yet viciously sharp, like glass beads skittering across a porcelain plate, every note dripping with the pleasure of toying with a man. Satisfied. Thoroughly satisfied. After so many days, she had finally recaptured the delicious sensation of holding a man entirely in the palm of her hand. Kawakami Tomi narrowed her eyes in gleeful contentment, gave a few light, leisurely claps, as though applauding a particularly bad performance, and her smile blazed so brilliantly it was almost painful to look at. Scorched by Tomi's mockery, the man's chest heaved several times. His complexion cycled from white to red, then clenched itself into a mottled, livid purple. His Adam's apple bobbed. He swallowed it down. I was joking, too. As long as Tomi-san found it entertaining. The muscles in the man's face twitched several times as he forced out a dry, brittle smile, the kind that takes visible effort to maintain. Ha. Kawakami Tomi doubled over as though someone had found her tickle spot, laughing so hard she had to clap both hands over her stomach. Ha, have you ever considered a career with the circus? Amiya Rin turned his face away to watch the slow drift of traffic on the far side of the street, and let out a silent sigh. This scene was genuinely difficult to watch. The moon was a moth hurtling straight at a flame, utterly determined to impale himself on the point of the blade, and Rin couldn't find a single gap to intervene. He had done his best to keep Tomi's magnetism from harming innocent people. But faced with someone this stubbornly besotted, he found himself rather powerless. Amanose stood with her head bowed, black hair falling forward to curtain half her face, expression unreadable. But her hands at her sides were clenched tight in her skirt, and she radiated a sadness that seemed to seep into the air around her. She had bent herself into every shape to suit Hiratsuka Makoto's tastes, never once pushed back against a single preference of his, and yet, standing right in front of him, she still couldn't hold a candle to a woman he had met 30 seconds ago. Hiratsuka Makoto appeared to be entirely oblivious to his companion's feelings. Or perhaps he simply didn't care. Ha. Is Tomi-san interested in the circus? Hiratsuka Makoto's gaze was glued to Tomi's face like adhesive. The moment she laughed, he seized on the thread and followed it with eager, fawning urgency. I know a magnificent circus, the Grand Babylus Circus. Have you heard of it? They're coming to Tokyo soon. We could go together, my treat. He thumped his chest, making the offer with expansive self-assurance. If you were going on stage to perform as the clown, I might actually consider it. Kawakami Tomi let her smile drop, gave her hair a lazy toss, and delivered the line with a breezy, floating lightness. The contempt wrapped in every word could not have been more obvious, and yet the man called Hiratsuka Makoto's eyes actually lit up. He edged half a step closer, his face flooding with a feverish, almost unhinged excitement. So does that mean Tomi-san is saying yes to my invitation? She's playing you. Amiya Rin let out another sigh and stepped forward, planting himself squarely between Tomi and Hiratsuka Makoto, his solid frame settling there like a wall. Right hand firm on his crutch, his stance was steady and immovable. His face replaced Kawakami Tomi's in the man's field of vision, and Hiratsuka Makoto immediately stiffened. The smile evaporated from his face, replaced instantly by undisguised irritation and hostility. Even if Tomi-san is teasing me, I'm perfectly happy to be teased. He craned his neck and angled sideways, trying to look past Amamiya Rin's shoulder, his gaze still nailed stubbornly to Tomi's face. Sir, the fact that you are dating Tomi-san does not make her your personal property. It also does not give you the right to speak on her behalf. Whether or not my feelings are welcome should be decided by Tomi-san herself. What sort of nonsense was this man speaking? Was any of it even coherent? If Amamiya Rin had actually been Kawakami Tomi's boyfriend, he'd have introduced the man to the end of his crutch by now. Amamiya Rin narrowed his eyes and was about to deploy the evil eye technique once more, startle the man off, do him a small mercy, when Kawakami Tomi chose that exact moment to press herself against him. Soft arms wound around his like a climbing vine. Warmth bled through the thin fabric, immediate and vivid. She tilted her face up, fingertip touching lightly to her red lips, and arranged her features into an expression of mild distress. Even so, I really don't want to be separated from Rin, not even for a moment. If we went to see a circus performance, that would be such a long time away from him. Hiratsuka Makoto's gaze snapped to where their arms were pressed together. His pupils constricted sharply. The muscles in his cheeks gave an involuntary, unnatural twitch. A flash of twisted expression, jealousy and resentment wound together, flickered across his face, and was gone. If he were the one wrapped in that warmth, that softness, that fragrance right now, he'd gladly shave 10 years off his life. Hiratsuka Makoto screamed inside his own head. With great effort he dragged his gaze away from the place where Amamiya Rin and Kawakami Tomi were joined, and forced it up to Amamiya Rin's eyes. Amamiya Rin was thoroughly unamused. His gaze grazed Hiratsuka Makoto's eyes and slid away. He turned his head toward Kawakami Tomi, who was very clearly enjoying the show, and fixed her with a look of plain disapproval. Haven't you had enough fun? We should go. Amamiya Rin's voice dropped a note, carrying a quiet weight that didn't invite argument. At that, Kawakami Tomi's smile faded. She pulled the corners of her mouth down in a wounded little pout. Far from loosening her grip on his arm, she held tighter, tilted her face up to look at him, and let her eyes go visibly misty, her voice thickening slightly. The way you're talking, it sounds like everything is my fault. She gave a small, petulant stamp of her foot, a delicate flush spreading across her fair cheeks. I'm the one who got accosted out of nowhere. I didn't do anything, I was just standing here. Honestly, it's always the same, whatever happens, somehow it ends up being my fault. Is it just because I'm too pretty? That's completely unreasonable. She grew more aggrieved with every sentence, her lashes trembling as though tears were one blink away, her whole manner precisely calculated to inspire sympathy in any onlooker. Amamiya Rin watched the performance without so much as a twitch of his brow. There is a saying, judge a person by their actions, not their intentions, because if you judge by intentions, no one in the world is innocent. But he and Kawakami Tomi shared a mental connection. Kawakami Tomi's desire to manipulate men was not something she could hide from him. And once she had that desire, all she needed was a few words. She didn't need to lift a finger to lead another man step by step into obsession. Judged by actions or by intentions, Tomi was up to no good. Since she appeared on the surface to be refusing, just barely, it could perhaps be classified as skirting the edges of the rules he'd laid down. Borderline behavior, at best. Facing Amamiya Rin's unmoved expression, a glimmer of smug satisfaction passed through Tomi's eyes. She knew perfectly well that he could read every thought in her head. But that was exactly what made it thrilling. How dare you speak to Tomi-san like that? Hiratsuka Makoto erupted on cue, entirely as Tomi had expected. He glared at Amamiya Rin with furious indignation. Tomi-san is simply too kind-hearted, she doesn't know how to say no bluntly. How can that possibly be her fault? She was even willing to give up a wonderful circus performance rather than be separated from you for a single moment. What a precious, devoted feeling that is. Such single-minded devotion. Such deep affection. And you dare speak to her like this. Infuriating. Absolutely infuriating. Hiratsuka Makoto's face contorted grotesquely, his fists clenching, his teeth audibly grinding as he glared at Amamiya Rin with open murderous resentment. How could such a man exist in the world, one who didn't know what was good for him? Why did this useless cripple get to have someone as breathtakingly beautiful and devoted as Tomi-san look at him twice? Infuriating. Maddening. He wanted to kill him. He wanted to take Tomi for himself, to keep her somewhere she could never move, never leave, never escape. To have Tomi-san hold you in her heart like this, you have absolutely no idea how lucky you are. And you stand here calling her a troublemaker. That is simply unconscionable. Hiratsuka Makoto's words were practically squeezed out through clenched teeth, soaked in frustrated, murderous hatred. The dark place inside him had begun to breed something genuinely unhinged. The morning breeze drifted down the street and turned up a few fallen leaves. Amanose still stood by the car with her head bowed, her slight figure pale and silent in the morning light. Amiya Rin narrowed his eyes slightly and met Hiratsuka Makoto's gaze. He could feel the malice radiating off the man. He should have driven this one away sooner. Once caught by Tomi's magnetism, simply driving him off wouldn't work. The only option was to knock him out cold and leave him behind. Of course, even that was treating the symptom rather than the cause. A temporary fix at best. Amiya Rin felt a mild pang of regret. He shouldn't have let Tomi linger here and waste time. Did you hear that? You should treasure me more, you know. The Tomi beside him laughed again, with every sign of genuine enjoyment. Tomi-san, it's only a few hours, just a few hours. It wouldn't take up much time at all. Every person deserves a little personal space of their own. If you love someone, you should still give them some time to themselves. Hiratsuka Makoto addressed Kawakami Tomi with barely suppressed desperation, still refusing to concede. Or rather, Kawakami Tomi's indiscriminate, radiating allure refused to let him go. But to cling on to this extent, right in front of his own girlfriend, it only confirmed that this man was a serial charmer who fell for a new woman every time he turned around. If it had been that other one, the pure love stalwart who had held out without falling for Tomi right up until the moment his memories were rewritten, a single encounter's worth of her charm would have been nothing more than a minor inconvenience. Excuse me, do you not speak human? Kawakami Tomi cut him off. Her smile was sweet as honey, her eyes were cold as knives. I don't want to go. To her, Hiratsuka Makoto was nothing more than a prop, something to use for a bit of flirtatious sparring with Amamiya Rin. Now that Rin was bored and irritated, the game was over. Tomi turned her head and rested her chin lightly on Amamiya Rin's shoulder. Rin and I have somewhere else to be shortly. We don't have time to waste on you. Be a good boy, step aside and stop pestering us. With that, she took Amamiya Rin's arm and steered them both around Hiratsuka Makoto. Hiratsuka Makoto lunged forward with a sharp cry and cut across their path again. His chest was heaving violently, a vein standing out on his forehead, his face flushed crimson. He fixed Amamiya Rin with a look of raw savagery, his clenched fists white-knuckled and trembling, lips pressed so tightly together they'd gone bloodless, as though he were physically restraining something monstrous. Tomi's footsteps paused. She didn't even bother to lift her eyes. The only answer she gave Hiratsuka Makoto was her voice, laced with cool, perfect contempt. I've seen quite enough of this particular clown act. It's gotten old. Amiya Rin's brow furrowed. He cast Tomi a cold, sideways glance, then planted his feet and readied himself. He was prepared for a fight. This man had probably been goaded to the edge of something unhinged by Tomi. Whether he launched himself at Rin right now, or waited until they walked away and came at them with the car, both were entirely plausible. Knock him out. Then leave. The decision made, Amamiya Rin's right hand tightened on his crutch, his body shifting subtly into position. But Hiratsuka Makoto made no move to attack. His face cycled through purple and red. After Tomi's bored, dismissive reply, he seemed to reach inside himself for the very last dregs of his strength, and then forced words out of his throat in a raw, self-lacerating rasp. If Tomi-san is really worried about leaving this gentleman. His eyes were nailed to the ground, as though lifting them would mean looking at something that burned. His voice dropped lower and lower, and yet it trembled with a kind of desperate, all-in recklessness. If it's because you want to stay together with your boyfriend. He paused. The muscles along his jaw clenched and released violently. I could treat both of you. Both of you both. The circus or breakfast, anywhere at all is fine. Having said it, he seemed to collapse inward, veins standing out at his temple, his eyes a tangled mess of humiliated burning and lunatic, all-or-nothing desperation. Amiya Rin's mind went blank. He blinked several times, staring at Hiratsuka Makoto in genuine bewilderment. His hand moved on instinct, reaching up toward his ear, about to fish inside it, to double-check he'd heard correctly. I said I'll treat both of you together. Whatever you want to eat, wherever you want to go, think of it as getting to know each other. Meeting new people is always nice, isn't it? As if hearing Amamiya Rin's wordless confusion, Hiratsuka Makoto repeated himself to fill the gap. He lifted his head and looked Amamiya Rin directly in the eyes, and what came through in his gaze was pure, naked pleading. Just say yes. Amiya Rin involuntarily took a step back. He had read about this type before in novels and online posts, the bootlicker who volunteers to pick up the tab for his crush's boyfriend, who runs errands nobody asked him to run. He'd read about them. He had not expected to meet one in the flesh. Makoto, what are you saying? Amanose nearly convinced herself she had misheard. Her face, already drained of color, went a shade whiter still. Her eyes went wide, stunned, uncomprehending, and fixed on Hiratsuka Makoto's profile. In those eyes, shock. Bewilderment. And then, slowly, something sinking and settling into a grief that looked on the verge of shattering. She had surrendered every preference she had, every streak of temper, just to accommodate him, and this is what she got in return. Him, in front of another woman, reduced to this. Was this some kind of joke? For a moment, tears threatened to spill from the corners of Amanose's eyes. Amiya Rin looked at her, and opened his mouth, then said nothing. Kawakami Tomi's footsteps stopped. Her voice was drenched in gleeful mockery. Treating him, too. My, aren't you generous? He. She looked Hiratsuka Makoto up and down, drinking in every detail of that expression, the mortified endurance, the desperate dignity, and her eyes narrowed to pleased, glittering slits, a light of pure, exquisite delight kindling deep within them. Walnut-chan for more chapters. New History, Danmachi, Summoning Rurigoku, and Other Chinibu Brats. Help us reach these goals. 100 Power Stones equals +1 Universal Bonus Chapter 133. The long hair in the attic 2775 words. Since you're being so sincere about it, I suppose I'll give you a chance. Kawakami Tomi gave a light, leisurely clap, the look of gleeful amusement on her face growing more pronounced by the second. This was genuinely delightful. A man so desperate to invite her out that he'd swallow every humiliation, even going out of his way to flatter a rival, now that was a rare species of clown, truly one of a kind. Such an entertaining clown. How could she possibly throw him aside so quickly? She turned to look at Amamiya Rin, drawing out her voice in a sticky, languid purr. Rin, someone's offering to treat us, it would be a shame to say no. Think of it as making a new friend. Amamiya Rin looked at that expression of hers, the one that would happily set the world on fire just to watch it burn, then slid his gaze to Hiratsuka Makoto's face, that mixture of desperation and yearning written plainly across it. He felt a profound, wordless exhaustion. Right, let's all be friends. Hiratsuka Makoto lit up like he'd just received a divine blessing, practically tumbling over himself to agree. There's no need to be friends and no need for you to treat us, but... Amamiya Rin said evenly. The Grand Babylos Circus. Name a date. Tomi and I will be there. In Amamiya Rin's mind, Hiratsuka Makoto had already become a time bomb with an unknown countdown, liable to go off at any moment. If he was going to explode, better to let it happen on Rin's terms. When the time came, he'd set the right conditions, apply a little pressure, and quietly hand the men over to the police. The moment Rin's blunt refusal landed, Hiratsuka Makoto's face clouded over instantly, the whites of his eyes swallowing most of his pupils, his whole presence flickering with something unstable and unpredictable. Then Rin's words turned, and that stormy expression shattered into something bordering on manic elation. His eyes lit with a strange, unsettling brightness. Wonderful. We can work on the friendship slowly for now. Shall we exchange contact information? Hiratsuka Makoto's hand shot into the inner pocket of his suit jacket. He produced a card holder, drew out 2 business cards, and extended them toward Rin and Tomi with both hands. Amamiya Rin accepted the card and gave it a brief glance. Hiratsuka Makoto, Section Chief of Sales at some trading company. Not a trivial title. Kawakami Tomi pinched the card between 2 fingers, gave it a careless once-over, then tucked it into Amamiya Rin's coat pocket. Hiratsuka Makoto then produced his phone, his gaze fixed intently on Kawakami Tomi. Rin, you do it, Tomi said, tossing him a coy glance. Otherwise you'll only get jealous. The look she shot Rin made Hiratsuka Makoto's expression sink. Amamiya Rin and Kawakami Tomi exchanged a glance. He pulled out his phone and dialed Hiratsuka Makoto's number. Only once the contact exchange was settled did Hiratsuka Makoto finally relent, walking back toward his car with 3 backward glances for every 2 steps forward. He was the only one walking, though. Amano-sei hadn't moved. Hiratsuka Makoto had already pulled open the driver's door and dropped into his seat before he noticed she hadn't followed. He frowned in obvious displeasure and called out, "What are you standing there gaping at?" Amano-sei turned to look at him. Her voice came out quiet, distant, almost hollow. "Hiratsuka-kun, what am I to you, exactly?" Soft as her voice was, it grated on Hiratsuka Makoto like nails on a chalkboard. He snapped at her, impatient. "What is this nonsense? Are you getting in the car or not?" "This is nonsense." Amano-sei let out a bleak, bitter laugh. She had never, not once in her life, felt as pathetic as she did right now. In Tomi-san's eyes, Makoto was nothing more than a clown. But in Makoto's eyes, wasn't she exactly the same? Hiratsuka Makoto's gaze slid toward Kawakami Tomi, who hadn't gone far. His expression hardened and he said coldly, "Let's break up." The words hit Amano-sei like a physical blow. Her whole body trembled, and yet, strangely, no tears came. Not even grief, not exactly. What was left at the bottom of everything was just a hollow, drifting sense of loss, like something she'd been carrying for so long she'd forgotten its weight. "I've been meaning to say this for a while," he continued, with the ease of someone delivering a prepared speech. "You've always gone out of your way to match my preferences, hairstyle, lipstick, clothes, perfume. Of course, any man would appreciate that. But when you're so focused on it, the pressure on my end gets heavy. That's not your fault. It's just that your type is better suited for a more serious kind of man. I'm too easygoing, I suppose. Someone like me needs someone just as easygoing." He delivered this breakup monologue with a faint air of self-satisfaction, the condescension of someone speaking down from a height. In his mind, Kawakami Tomi was simply a far better fit for him. Amano-sei said nothing. He tossed that hollow farewell into the air and drove off without another glance. Amano-sei stood staring in the direction the car had gone, both hands in her pockets, her face carrying neither joy nor grief. Amamiya Rin had already stopped walking. A contemplative expression crossed his face. He had initially felt a pang of guilt. This girl had been dumped because of Kawakami Tomi, and he'd thought to offer a word of comfort, but then. The scene in front of him was triggering a very distinct sense of déjà vu. Amamiya Rin slipped his arm free from Tomi's, reached into his inner coat pocket, and produced a small notebook. He flipped through several pages and quickly found the entry he was looking for. The long-haired girl in the attic, key plot points. A fickle man breaks up with his overly accommodating girlfriend. After the breakup, she decides to cut the long hair she'd grown for him. The hair, having already developed a will of its own, wins around a rat, and then severs her neck. Worrying he might forget manga plotlines over time, Amamiya Rin had written down the broad strokes well in advance. The long-haired girl and the fickle man standing before him now matched this entry almost perfectly. Whether it was truly the same story, he couldn't say for certain. He hadn't remembered the characters' names before he'd written the notes, since it was a short story, nowhere near as well known as Tomi or The Spiral. Better safe than sorry. Amano-san. Amamiya Rin spoke up. Amano-san turned around and met his gaze. I'm sorry. But for what it's worth, in my view, your boyfriend wasn't a good person. Just like he said himself, he's fickle. Even if today hadn't happened, you two would have ended up here eventually. This breakup is a good thing for you. It frees you from something that was weighing you down. Amamiya Rin said it with complete sincerity. Amano-san heard the words, blinked, and felt a sudden flare of indignation rising in her chest. What did he mean, the breakup was a good thing? What did he mean, it freed her? What kind of apology was this? Wasn't this just pouring salt directly into an open wound? But when she looked up and met Amamiya Rin's eyes, that flare of anger inexplicably died before it could catch. His gaze was focused and earnest. No pity in it. No hollow, performative sympathy. He was simply looking at her, steadily and seriously, stating something he genuinely believed to be true. Maybe you're right. Amano-san tugged the corner of her mouth into something between tired and relieved, a rueful smile. Honestly, I knew. I've always known. I just kept thinking, if I tried a little harder, maybe we could. She didn't finish the sentence. She just shook her head slowly, her long hair swaying with the movement. Amamiya Rin's gaze lingered on her hair. Beautiful hair, black and glossy, smooth as silk, reaching all the way down to her waist. Beside him, Kawakami Tomi stifled a yawn. Are you quite done? I'm starving. She looked at Rin, her tone sliding into theatrical indignation. And would you stop staring at other women? She was just that man's girlfriend, you know. Don't tell me, because he hit on me, you got annoyed and now you're thinking of stealing his girlfriend away. She twirled a strand of her hair around one finger, smile curving with wicked amusement. He, if you're going to do something like that, could you at least do it somewhere I can't see? Before her words had even finished landing, Amano-san went rigid, startled, or perhaps trying to avoid any appearance of impropriety, and quickly stepped back several paces. If you have nothing useful to say, you can stay quiet. Understood. Amamiya Rin narrowed his eyes, and shot Tomi a brief sideways look. Then he turned back to Amano-san. You're not taking any of what she just said seriously, are you? Of course not, of course I'm not. Amano-san gave an awkward little laugh, but her answer carried genuine sincerity. I don't think you're that kind of person at all. They had only just met, and under rather unpleasant circumstances at that. But even so, Amano-san felt that Amamiya Rin carried a certain quality about him, something upright and uncompromising, a presence that made you feel, instinctively, that here was someone principled. Which was why it puzzled her so much. Why was someone like him with someone like Kawakami Tomi? She didn't want to speak ill of anyone behind their back, but Kawakami Tomi and Amamiya Rin were polar opposites in every way. They were attractive together, yes, but as a pair they made no sense whatsoever. Amamiya Rin's gaze passed over Amano-san's hair and he asked, "What are you planning to do now?" Planning. She repeated the word blankly. I'll go home, I think. I don't really feel like going today. Not in the right headspace. As she said it, a bitter smile drifted across her face. Let me buy you breakfast. Amamiya Rin said it out of nowhere. Both Amano-san and Tomi turned to look at him at the same time. Tomi dragged the syllable out in a long, displeased note, puffing out her cheeks. Think of it as an apology for what happened today. I've always believed verbal apologies are the most useless things in the world, Amamiya Rin said, matter-of-factly. That's not necessary. Didn't you just say yourself, this breakup was good for me? Amano-san moved to refuse at once. Even if I believe it's a good thing, it still caused you pain. If you won't let me make it up to you, I'll feel guilty about it. Amamiya Rin said this in a perfectly calm voice, his face showing not the faintest trace of guilt. Amanose was left completely speechless, blinking in mild bewilderment. She got the sense that Amamiya Rin wasn't the type to cling or push. Which was exactly why this insistence felt strange. Was he really just trying to apologize? Still, Amanose's nature was too accommodating. Even when something felt off, she didn't have the spine to refuse him outright. And so, a few minutes later, the three of them were seated by a window in a cafe at the side of the street. The morning crowd was thin. The air was threaded through with the rich scent of freshly ground coffee and the warm sweetness of baked pastries. Tomi had chosen the window seat. The moment she sat down, she picked up the menu, one fingertip sliding idly across the photographs on the pages, a faint furrow between her brows. Everything looks so ordinary, she murmured under her breath. They had tens of millions of yen from the distillery, more than enough to eat at an upscale restaurant. Don't treat money like it means nothing. Just because you have funds now doesn't mean you can throw them around. There are plenty of things that money will need to go toward, and besides, don't forget, they're all watching that sum you're sitting on. Amamiya Rin replied in his mind, and a ripple of laughter echoed through the Tomi network. Because of Amamiya Rin's restrictions, all the Tomi instances had been keeping their spending in check, and now that a substantial sum had come in, not a single one of them was willing to let any other Tomi have it to herself. Tomi clicked her tongue, looking displeased, and launched into a squabble with the other Tomis inside the Tomi network. Amamiya Rin ordered plainly bread and coffee. Amanose ordered the most modest set on the menu, a simple sandwich combo. Tomi dragged her feet and eventually, grudgingly, settled on a fruit salad and a croissant. While they waited for the food, the table fell into a somewhat awkward silence. Tomi propped her chin on one hand and stared out the window, visibly uninterested in the proceedings. Amanose kept her eyes down on the tablecloth pattern, studying it as though some profound secret were woven into the fabric. It was unavoidable, really. Enough uncomfortable things had happened between them to fill a small anthology. Are you and Tomi in the same year? Amamiya Rin asked, opening a topic. Amanose looked up and seemed to exhale a small breath of relief. Something to talk about was infinitely better than sitting in silence. Same department, different classes. Tomi-san is very well known. Well known? Rin followed up. Because she's so beautiful, everyone talks about her. Amanose smiled, though it took a little effort. Though Tomi-san doesn't seem to come to class very often. I rarely see her in the lecture halls. Because it's a waste of time, Tomi said, without looking up from the window. Amanose did not agree, but she didn't contradict her either. The food arrived before long. Amanose ate her sandwich in small, careful bites. Tomi speared a strawberry from her fruit salad with a fork, scrutinized it with visible skepticism, and only then, reluctantly, put it in her mouth. By the way, Amamiya Rin said, taking a sip of coffee as though something had just occurred to him. His gaze drifted again to Amanose's hair. You've been growing your hair for a long time, haven't you? And you take good care of it, it's beautiful. Amanose blinked, her fingers instinctively curling around the ends of her hair. Yes, I haven't cut it in a long time. Hiratsuka-kun, he liked long hair. Her voice dipped when she said his name. Must be a lot of work to maintain. Not too bad, I'm used to it. Amanose gave a small smile. The washing and blow-drying does take a while, but thinking about it now, I really was being foolish. Are you thinking of cutting it? Amamiya Rin asked. Amanose was quiet for a moment, then slowly nodded, her expression caught somewhere between forced cheer and resignation. It really is too much trouble. And now that we've broken up, there's no point keeping it. Better to cut it short, more practical. It's not without meaning, you know, Rin said, unhurried. The words for hair and God are homophones in Japanese. Did you know that? As far back as the Nara period, hair was considered a sacred symbol of life. People believed it was not merely a representation of vitality, but an embodiment of it. There's even that old saying, "A woman's hair is her life." There's actually a shrine dedicated to this in Kyoto, the Okagami Shrine in Sagano, the only shrine in all of Japan enshrined to the deity of hair. The connection between hair and the divine runs quite deep, apparently. He said it casually, as though simply sharing a curious piece of trivia, but his eyes remained, quietly and deliberately, on Amanose-'s hair. Plus 40 ch. Walnut-chan New History, Danmachi, Summoning Rurigoku, and other Chunibu brats. Let's achieve our community goals. 100 Power Stones equals plus 1 extra chapter for everybody. Chapter 134, Personal Growth is Conquering One's Weak Past. 2683 Words in Shinto animism. Hair shares the same phonetic root as the word for deity, and so it has long been invested with a dual significance, as a vessel for life force and a medium for the divine. The longer and more lustrous the hair, the fuller the soul it was said to carry, the stronger one's fortune. Cutting it was seen as severing the spirit, shortening one's life. Even if people don't put much stock in that sort of thing anymore, you've poured a great deal of feeling into your hair, haven't you? Amamiya Rin set down his teacup, studying Amanose-'s long hair with a contemplative expression. Belief is your magic. That much, at least, holds true here. In this world's logic, the existence of long hair in the attic was not without reason. If Amamiya Rin's read on the situation was correct, Amanose herself possessed a certain quality, and her feelings for Hiratsuka Makoto were crystallized in the very hair she had grown for his sake. To put it simply, Amanose's belief force had taken up residence in her long hair. Because of Hiratsuka Makoto's betrayal, the positive emotion that had once been suffused with love would now curdle into resentment, turning that waist-length hair into a curse born from her own soul. The moment Amanose decided to cut it, her hair would kill her to preserve its own existence, and then go after Hiratsuka Makoto next. Of course, all of this was Amamiya Rin's analysis based on what he knew. Whether it was actually the case, he had no way of being certain. The logic of curses was not something the ordinary human mind was built to follow. Whatever the case, the time and feeling you've put into this beautiful hair is real. It would be a shame to cut it off so carelessly just because of a breakup. Doesn't that feel like letting yourself down? Amamiya Rin met Amanose's eyes. She looked back at him, a trace of confusion flickering in her gaze. You might be thinking of cutting your hair as a ritual, a way of leaving the past behind. But if I'm being honest, it sounds more like avoidance. Running from your past is easy. It feels clean. But it doesn't solve anything, because the past is always still there. If you don't face it squarely, you'll never truly move on. It becomes a splinter lodged in your chest. Every time you think of it, it digs in a little deeper. Listening to Amamiya Rin's counsel, Amanose's fingers tightened around the ends of her hair, her expression wavering. She held his gaze, and she could feel the sincerity in it, the unmistakable warmth of someone who was genuinely thinking about her, not just speaking at her. That focused look. Those measured words. A quiet, convincing force, slowly drawing her tangled heart into something more ordered. What should I do? The question came out before she could stop it, and a lost, uncertain expression settled over her face. The hardest thing to face is usually the road you've already walked. Feeling regret. Feeling humiliated. Wanting to erase every trace of that time, that's natural. But real courage isn't about rushing to draw a line under it all. It's about being able to turn around, look clearly at who you were on that road, and then acknowledge it. Accept it. Decide where you want to go from here. Amamiya Rin's gaze rested on Amanose's long hair, then returned to her eyes as he continued, unhurried and sincere. If you're willing, think of this hair as a trial. A trial sent from the past. Growth is nothing more than repeatedly overcoming the weaknesses of who you used to be. The day you cut your hair not because you broke up with Hiratsuka Makoto, but simply because you feel like a new style, that's the day you'll know you've passed the trial. That the knot inside you is finally undone. Amanose listened in silence. The dense, stagnant weight pressing against her chest seemed to ease, little by little, with each word Amamiya Rin spoke, as if a faint path had become visible through the fog. A path toward truly letting go of the past and walking forward. I think I understand a little, now. She said it softly, the bewilderment in her eyes slowly giving way to a quiet, growing clarity. She bowed her head toward Amamiya Rin with genuine gratitude. Thank you, Amamiya-kun. I'll try to make peace with it, and with who I was. Half an hour later, at the cafe entrance, Amonose gave Amamiya Rin a small bow and turned to leave. Kawakami Tomi slipped her arm through Amamiya Rin's, and the two of them strolled leisurely along the street. Sunlight filtered through the canopy of roadside trees, scattering dappled light across them both. Tisk, tsk. Tomi let out a short, unreadable scoff. She angled her face toward him, regarding Amamiya Rin from the corner of those beautiful eyes of hers, her tone soaked in undisguised amusement. My, that was quite the speech. Vessel of life force, divine medium, running from reality, real courage, overcoming the trial, you even pulled out hypnosis guidance techniques, didn't you? All that effort to talk someone out of cutting their hair. You stopped just short of planting a direct suggestion, treasure your hair forever. The situation didn't allow for it. Otherwise, a direct suggestion would have been the cleanest solution. Amamiya Rin walked on steadily, leaning on his cane. He spared her a brief sidelong glance, his face carrying no particular expression. Her hair is too close to her. If she went to cut it, if that thing truly has a will of its own, taking her life might be a matter of seconds. No matter how fast I reacted, I couldn't stop it in time. The only option right now is to stabilize her, and avoid triggering the death condition. Amamiya Rin's brow creased slightly. And besides, belief force is real in this world. If she can genuinely let go, perhaps the obsession dwelling in that hair will dissolve along with it. And if she can't let go? Tomi pressed, a faintly entertained gleam in her eyes. I don't know. Amamiya Rin had no answer for that. It was too close. Too immediate. The moment the hair's curse triggered, he would have no chance to intervene. All he could do for now was buy time, stretch the countdown a little longer. But as long as there's time, there's a chance to find another solution. If the fatal outcome triggers directly, there's no possibility left at all. Tomi stared at him for a few seconds, then let out a soft, amused humph. She reached over and pressed her fingers to the crease between his brows, smoothing it out. Honestly, if you just stopped meddling in other people's business, wouldn't your life be so much easier? And whose fault is that? If you hadn't gone and stirred up trouble, I never would have run into Amonose in the first place, and I certainly wouldn't be worrying about anyone's hair. Amamiya Rin replied, perfectly composed. Always blaming me. But even so, I like you, you know. Just the way you are. Tomi laughed and hugged his arm. Back at the apartment, Amamiya Rin and Tomi parted ways. She returned to her room, while he climbed into the jeep and drove to the Drink Sports Club gym. He parked, pushed open the heavy door, and was met with that familiar layered scent. The cold bite of metal, the damp weight of steam, and something else, a thick, invisible pressure that hung in the air. There was none of the sweat smell typical of an ordinary gym. The place smelled more like industrial machinery that had been running at full load for hours, faint traces of machine oil and ozone. If not for the sign outside, no one would ever mistake this for a fitness center. You finally made it, the morning session is about to start. A nimble figure swept in from the side, a firm arm looping itself around Amamiya Rin's shoulders without so much as asking permission. A lazy, intimate voice purred close to his ear, and warm breath tickled the edge of it until his earlobe went faintly warm. I timed it. I'm not late. Feeling the solid elasticity pressed against his back, Amamiya Rin replied without turning around. He didn't need to look. There was only one person who could call him that. It had to be one of the Kawakami Tomis. He tilted his head slightly, and in his peripheral vision caught a face, just as beautiful as any other Tomi, but radiating a fuller, more vivid glow from frequent exercise, almost dazzling in its vitality. Where most Tomis had a refined, delicate beauty, this face carried an added edge of wild flair and healthy luminance. Her eyes were sharper and brighter, as if small flames burned in the depths of her pupils. The arm around him was noticeably more solid than any other Tomi's, smooth muscle lines running taut and compact beneath the skin, carrying a sense of power that far surpassed the ordinary. From that single casual embrace, Amamiya Rin felt an irresistible force pull him firmly against her. This was the Tomi who had synced with him during his very first triple compression training session. Thanks to the gym's particular nature, this Tomi had developed an addiction to training. This was already her fourth visit. They had spent so long in the dream world that minor details like this, too trivial to bother recording, had slipped beyond recall. Amamiya Rin tested his footing and tried to pull free. Not so much as a millimeter. The strength in this body had likely long surpassed any ordinary fitness enthusiast. No, with triple compression at those output levels, it was probably professional grade. She could probably go head-to-head for a bodybuilding championship. Tomi laughed and let go of his shoulders, then immediately circled around in front of him, hands on her hips, chest held with a subtle lift of pride. Unlike the other Tomis, she had changed into a sports tank top and shorts that allowed for free movement. Full pectoral muscles, sharply defined deltoids, and well-developed biceps were all on full display, yet her waist remained slender, and the lines of her abs were clearly visible. The muscle distribution was balanced. Her build was slightly larger than the average Tomi's, but nothing was bloated or disproportionate. Her whole body moved like a she-leopard coiled with explosive power, feminine curves intact, yet housing a kinetic strength that could detonate at any moment. That superbly conditioned physique combined with her signature bewitching face produced a visual impact that was genuinely startling. Amamiya Rin's gaze swept over the changes in her build, and he felt a flicker of genuine surprise, even the faintest trace of quiet envy. He'd wasted too much time at the hospital. His own body had only undergone triple compression training once. What a waste. Beautiful, isn't it? That one says something about growing into the true Tomi. Laughable. What kind of growth is becoming a blood-sucking monster? Mixing in external substances is nothing. Reaching the absolute peak of the body through pure, unassisted training, that is what it means to be the perfect Kawakami Tomi. Tomi raised her arm in a triumphant flex. The bicep surged up like a small mountain, muscle fiber definition sharply visible. So the other Tomi's words about change and growth had indeed lodged somewhere in her memory. Only, unlike the Tomi who sought transformation by becoming a vampire, this one had lost herself entirely to this gym, and sworn to forge a perfect physique through sheer discipline, defining what the name Kawakami Tomi could mean. Beautiful. Even a bodybuilding champion couldn't match your build, I'd say. Amamiya Rin said it while glancing toward the other members resting and warming up nearby. He spotted one veteran member who had been training far longer than Tomi. The muscle mass was enormous, but for sheer aesthetic quality, it fell slightly short of Tomi's. One was a man, the other was Kawakami Tomi. A pleased smile spread across Tomi's face. Then something else surfaced in her memory, and a flicker of contempt crossed her eyes as she shifted topics, her tone sharpening with undisguised disdain. What a waste that skinless lunatic died when she did. Amamiya Rin cocked his head. If she had lived one more day, I could have shown her what real beauty looks like. Muscle that only becomes visible after stripping away the skin isn't fit to be compared with muscle developed through training an intact body. Tomi raised her chin, arms folded across her chest, speaking with imperious certainty. Saying the skin hides the muscle so one can't appreciate true beauty. What a joke. Since when is muscle such an inconvenient thing? The beauty of muscle lies in the forging of it, in the mastery of it, in the rhythmic lines, and taut fullness of power flowing in and out of control. When trained with care and intention, the skin is the finest medium there is for displaying the beauty of what lies beneath. She's dead now. There's no point dwelling on it. At the end of the day, she was just a lunatic. Amamiya Rin gave a quiet, amused shake of his head. Oh, aren't you going back for the ointment? Something had occurred to him. The other Tomies were all working on their alchemical salves, but this one showed absolutely no urgency. There's no need for that. Whether the apology demon made me uglier, I honestly can't say, but I know I don't need any ointment to make myself more perfect. Needing a salve to repair your beauty is just proof that you don't trust your own charm. Tomie stepped forward, closing the distance between them, those uncanny eyes fixed directly on his, her voice brimming with unshakable conviction. Those words, unilaterally dismissing every other Tomie, immediately sent shockwaves crashing through the Tomie network. Can't you tell your mind has already been warped by that gym? You're covered in revolting muscle. Surely you don't actually think you look beautiful. Ugh, I didn't want to say anything, but you're being so thick-headed that I have no choice but to tell you the truth and mock you for it. Since when does any beautiful woman have muscles like that? Grinning away like some men, honestly, enough. The Tomies launched a coordinated attack on the one who had committed herself to physical transformation. Whether they were speaking truthfully, Amamiya Rin couldn't say. But one remark among them sparked something in him. He settled inward, quietly entering Diana, drawing his mind into stillness, thoughts going calm as a windless lake. The Tomie beside him had sunk too deep to notice it herself, but he could feel it. This gym had been subtly interfering with his mental state all along. The fleeting envy he had felt toward Tomie just moments ago was precisely that at work. But it was nothing to worry about. Amamiya Rin's mind and spirit settled into quiet, like an ancient well undisturbed by any ripple. The state of Diana had long since been woven into his everyday breathing and thought, a foundation as solid as bedrock. Everything strange and unsettling he had lived through would, in the end, become nourishment for his continued growth. Plus 40 ch, Walnut-chan new history, Danmachi, summoning Rurigoku, and other Chinibu brats. Let's achieve our community goals. 100 Power Stones equals plus 1 extra chapter for everybody. Chapter 135. Arms in place. 1470 words. The preparatory phase was over. Now came the pain. The moment the pressurization training began, time seemed to stretch to 10 times its normal length. By the time it ended, every last inch of Amamiya Rin's muscles was trembling violently. For a stretch of time he could barely feel his own limbs. He didn't have the strength to so much as twitch a finger. His vision blurred at the edges. His ears rang with a low, persistent drone. Only his heart still moved, beating heavily and slowly in his chest, each pump sending a dull, distended ache radiating through every blood vessel in his body. Are you even going to make it? The words, humiliating, by any man's measure, sounded close to his ear. A pair of strong, capable arms slid in beneath him, one under his armpits and one under his knees, and Amamiya Rin was lifted clean off the ground. Kawakami Tomie had already been through 5 rounds of pressurization. With her absurd regenerative power and a tolerance for pain that ranked among the best in the world, she had adapted to the aftereffects with casual ease. Amamiya Rin had no strength left to argue. Thinking was difficult enough on its own. His face was pale, his lips drained of color. His eyelids drooped half shut. It was willpower alone keeping him from surrendering to the exhaustion and the pain and simply blacking out. In full view of everyone present, Kawakami Tomie carried Amamiya Rin toward the gym exit with a sure, unhurried stride. The other members, still catching their breath, couldn't help but look over, and what crossed their faces was unmistakably envy. I'm so jealous. She still has the energy to carry the new guy out of here. That's insane. Her muscles are gorgeous. When am I ever going to build strength like that? Her physical talent is something else entirely. The members murmured among themselves, their admiring gazes drifting over the arms and calves Kawakami Tomie was using to carry Amamiya Rin. Even the coach and the senior members wore looks of genuine surprise. Tomie hadn't been here long, but the ability she had already put on display surpassed every other member of the Drink Sports Club. She might be the one who lasts longest under my training philosophy, the coach said to no one in particular. He stood with his arms folded across his chest, watching Kawakami Tomi carry her charge steadily out the door, a grin splitting his face to reveal teeth stained tobacco yellow, his eyes lit with a fierce, hungry excitement. Kawakami Tomi paid no attention to the stares at her back. She carried Amamiya Rin out of the gym and into the unfiltered blaze of the afternoon sun, which hit him hard enough that he instinctively squeezed his eyes shut, but free of the gym's layered atmosphere of metal, ozone, and invisible pressure, his body felt, if only fractionally, lighter. Tomi walked straight to the jeep parked at the roadside and fished the keys from Amamiya Rin's pocket. She freed one hand to pull open the rear door, then laid him down across the back seat, flat on his back. The moment he made contact with the relative softness of the car seat, the taut wire holding Amamiya Rin's nerves together slackened just slightly. A deeper, heavier exhaustion came flooding in, threatening to swallow him whole. Amamiya Rin bit down on the tip of his tongue. The taste of iron spread through his mouth. He used the sharp sting to keep himself conscious. Tomi shut the rear door, then walked around and dropped into the driver's seat. She buckled her seatbelt, started the engine, all of it practiced and smooth. The engine turned over and cool air began to flow from the vents. The Jeep pulled out steadily into the traffic of the early afternoon, merging into the flow of cars heading toward the upscale apartment building in the Setagaya area. A short while later, Kawakami Tomi carried Amamiya Rin up and into the apartment. She pushed open the door to find the living room, already fairly lively. On the sofa sat the Tomi who had set her sights on becoming a vampire, legs crossed, leafing through a thick hardcover book. Its cover bore faded gilt Latin lettering, the black magic grimoire seized from Kawahara Miyuki. At the sound of the door, she looked up, her gaze swept across Amamiya Rin, and then landed on Kawakami Tomi carrying him in. Her mouth immediately pulled into a scowl. Spread across the carpet was a large piece of dark waterproof tarpaulin, covered in an assortment of strange objects. The most conspicuous was a brutish-looking rifle. It appeared to have been assembled by force from various salvage components, a seamless steel pipe serving as the barrel, wrapped tightly on the outside with coils of rough copper wire that connected to several capacitor banks bundled together with electrical tape and cable, trailing to thick wires at the rear that led to a pair of car batteries set side by side. The entire device was bare metal and exposed coil, without a single piece of casing, radiating the unmistakable danger of something that could detonate at any moment. Beside it lay a shotgun that was also clearly hand-assembled, several glass bottles filled with murky liquid, a few irregularly shaped improvised explosive devices, and some loose ammunition. Another Tomi sat nearby, polishing a handgun with a soft cloth. At the sound of the door opening, she snatched up the rifle and leveled the muzzle directly at Kawakami Tomi. Her finger rested on the trigger. A cold, provocative smirk curved her lips. Kawakami Tomi looked right through the hostility of these two imposters. The one pointing the rifle at her received nothing but contempt. She set Amamiya Rin down against the wall, making sure he was steady, then turned to face the armed Tomi. Her voice carried the absolute certainty of someone who had already calculated the outcome. Beyond 7 paces, the gun wins. Within 7 paces, I guarantee you won't get that trigger pulled in time. Within 7 paces, the gun is both fast and accurate. The moment Armaments Tomi's words left her mouth, a low, urgent electrical hum tore through the air. The capacitor banks along the rifle's body blazed to life with arcs of dangerous electric blue. The coils wrapped around the barrel flared bright. Not the crack of gunpowder. Something sharper, the sound of a high-velocity object ripping through the air itself. A blurred gray streak exploded from the muzzle and screamed toward Fleshmod Tomi's face. In the space between lightning and thunder, Fleshmod Tomi moved. Her center of gravity dropped in an instant. Knees bent. Her entire upper body swung like a pendulum, pivoting on her spine, and snapped violently to the lower left. The steel ball screamed past, grazing the tips of her whipping hair. The shockwave raked across her temple, even shearing through a single strand, leaving a thin red line across her earlobe. And she didn't pause for even a fraction of a second. The momentum of the dodge hadn't even finished before the right foot she'd planted into the floor detonated with full force. The solid muscle of her calf bulged violently, straining the fabric of her athletic shorts taut. The carpet beneath her feet let out a sound like something tearing under unbearable strain, and Fleshmod Tomi's figure became a cannonball, the distance between them erased in an instant. Armaments Tomi's pupils contracted to pinpoints. She tried to react. Fleshmod Tomi was already in front of her. The ball of her front foot hit the ground, killing her momentum. Her rear foot slammed down immediately after, locking her center of gravity solid as bedrock. More terrifying still, throughout all of this, her right fist, her entire right arm, had begun a transformation that was horrifying to witness with the naked eye. The bicep and forearm muscles, already sharply defined, inflated like something was being pumped inside them, or more accurately, layered. The muscle fibers beneath the skin writhed and churned, the color deepening rapidly, the texture hardening until it resembled the dense, knotted heartwood of an ancient tree. Across the surface of the fist, a layer of gray-white dense keratinous material proliferated wildly. In the span of a single breath, it had formed a bone-armored fist, twice the size of a normal human's, all jagged angles, brutal geometry, a battering ram of flesh and bone. Read more, Walnut-chan New History, Danmachi, Summoning Rurigoku, and other Chinibu brats help us hit our community goals. 100 Power Stones equals +1 bonus chapter for everyone. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Novels Wonderland.